This episode is with Tori Pintar. Tori is an all-around amazing person. She is a professional photographer. She is also a website designer and helps people and businesses with their branding and digital marketing. Tori is a great athlete. She's a climber, a skier, and a distance runner. Tori loves to travel internationally. Tori is highly involved in our community here in Bozeman and supports several local causes. Tori is an amazing chef, and I love eating anything that she makes. In this podcast, we discuss growing up in a divorced household. We discuss the challenges of breaking through thought patterns from our childhood and upbringing as you mature and as the world changes around you. We explore the growth and self-confidence that comes from being a solo female traveler and getting a real-world education through traveling in foreign countries. We examine the process of adapting your business and career as your interests change over time. I hope you enjoy. So you kick us off, because you always kick us off.
Okay.
Kind of
Kick us off. Tori, where are you from? Where were you born?
I was born in Westlake Village, California, in a hospital that no longer exists.
They tore it down?
I did?
No, they did.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I just know I was born somewhere that is kind of odd. I mean, I lived there as a kid and I never saw it, so.
Yeah.
Is that where you grew up?
Yeah. I went to elementary school until sixth grade there, and then we moved to the Valley so that I could become a Valley girl in California.
What part of this? I'm really unfamiliar with the geography in California. What part of the state is this from?
I grew up
so Westlake
30
Village,
minutes. Yeah. Well, when I moved to the Valley, I grew up like 30 minutes from Pasadena.
Okay.
Off the same highway, yeah.
You guys were essentially
so like 20 miles from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, she grew up. You're probably 20 miles from me, and we're both 20 miles from Los Angeles, just kind of in a different direction.
And Westlake Village is inland of Malibu. Like, we could take a back way that was through trail, or where you could go through hiking on a lot of trails to get to Malibu. But Westlake Village was in Ventura County, not LA County. Yeah. So it was a little more.
You were what? How long did it take you to get to the beach?
It's like little kid time, so I would say like an hour.
Yeah.
But that
probably,
could be...
it's probably about an hour.
Yeah. That could be incorrect, because everything was a very long time when you're a child. Like 5 minutes lasted forever.
Do you remember living in Westlake Village well? What was that like?
I mean, I didn't know anything else at that point. So to me, it was like formative. This is what growing up. Most everyone lives in suburbia. Like, my grandfather walked me to school on a green belt, and we practiced my spelling words. And my school was the Westlake Wizards, and it was very it was hot because it was Southern California a lot of the time. So you would get excited when you would run through the sprinklers. We played in the cul-de-sac and tried to use ropes to build a tree house with the neighbor kids, which
building a tree house out of ropes.
Yeah. That was all we had.
All right.
It didn't work very well. Yeah. I mean, in the spring we would go catch tadpoles, and then we would put them in and watch them turn into frogs in my grandparents' backyard.
So there was like a creek running through the backyard, or like an irrigation ditch or something?
There was a big wash that would have water in it only in the spring.
Yeah.
So because there was often drought or just not tons of water.
Right.
So yeah, it was very quintessential.
Do you have siblings or no?
I have a stepbrother and technically 2 half-brothers, which probably sounds weird to say technically 2 half-brothers, but I'm pretty estranged from my dad and his wife, and those kids are a lot younger than me.
So you didn't grow up with any of them?
I when I was young, no. I'm 13 and 15 years older than my half-brothers.
Okay.
My stepbrother I lived with for 6 years, for middle school and high school.
Okay.
But yeah, the reference point of, I still speak to my dad, but I hadn't seen him for 11 years until this last fall. And had I not gone to see him, I don't know. I've never seen him again. So, yeah. So, yeah, that's funny. My half-brother got married and has already had a kid. And
how old's your half-brother?
He's only 24, 25. He's pretty young for having.
And so you lived with him for For what ages? From like what age to what age?
My half brother I didn't live with.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My stepbrother I lived with for 6 years, from 6th or 7th grade through until I went to college.
Okay.
Because I'm older than him by 3 years.
Okay. Got it. And what's his name?
Chris.
Where does he live?
He lives in Phoenix.
Okay.
And he just reminded me that he called during our Mother's Day breakfast, and we said we were going to call him back, and we didn't.
Got it. Got it.
So now I feel bad.
Yeah. Well, your mom can do that.
Well, yeah. I should probably call him too. I was supposed to talk to him.
Yeah.
Do you still have family there where you grew up?
No. Mm-mm. I mean, I still have some family in California, but they're all in the Central Valley. And I have a couple of friends from high school that still live in the LA area or Hollywood area. But I don't have a lot of reason to go there anymore. Most of the time I go to San Francisco because my best friend lives there.
Okay.
And I like it better in Northern California.
Where in Central Valley do you have family?
In Fresno.
Okay. Yeah. Got it.
So.
In the heart of the valley.
Mm-hmm.
What were you like as a little girl?
My mom said I like to talk a lot. She would get very tired sometimes because I just kept talking.
That is hilarious. Hey, you wore me out by talking.
Yeah. She didn't tell me that until I was older.
That's hilarious.
But I would go visit my dad in the summer when my parents separated and he lived in Idaho. And I would be gone for like a month or 2 months.
Where in Idaho?
Boise area.
Okay.
And then I would come back and she would always say, and she still loves to tell this story, I always forgot how much you talked. And then you'd come home and you talked my ear off. So
yeah, I wonder what your dad was, what your dad thought. Because he, like, all of a sudden he has this young girl on his hands
yeah,
that he's responsible for, and he's probably not used to.
He was the epitome of like being the cool dad, though.
Okay.
Like when he still lived in California with us on the weekends, he would go and buy Taco Bell for all the kids that lived on the street, or like go to the Circle K and buy like every kid a treat.
Yeah.
And like he bought me a rifle when I was 10, even though
Sounds like a cool dad.
He bought me, I mean, because I was obviously going to be an elk hunter. One year he gave me
That is so funny.
like a professional, like what you would go. And I was like 12. I used it one time.
That is so funny because you got to think like what goes through a grown man's mind to do that.
Yeah. I mean, he traveled a lot for work when I was younger, when my parents were still sort of together, to China and Hong Kong. And then when they were separated, he still traveled, but he would send packages and they would be like, one time I actually was really upset because he was like pretending to be a spy in China, and he wrote this like,
Your dad worked for the CIA.
Mr. K has come, and like I don't know, but like I kind of thought it was serious, and it sort of freaked me out, and I was like, is he safe? Like, because it was all a joke on like the letterhead of the hotel he was staying at, and
yeah.
And it was before like we didn't really have the internet.
Okay, so this is interesting. Let's go into this. So,
can I ask one question which is relevant? How old were your parents when they had you? Like, how old was your dad when he was doing this stuff?
My parents were 27 and 28-ish, or 28. So I was 10 when I got it, so he was 38. So 1 year younger than I am currently.
Okay.
He moved to Boise, or like he lived in like an Eagle.
Meridian, yeah.
And he'd always dreamed of starting this gun company, or like a company that sold accessories to guns, which he did eventually do. But yeah, it was very, I mean, the elk.
So he just had a gun thing going on.
But the archery thing is pretty. And one of the way he gave me the gift is he put an arrow on the Christmas tree with a note hanging from it that said like, William Tell has a gift to give you, because of like him shooting. And I don't know. Like, so everything was kind of.
When did you get a bow?
Oh, that same. It wasn't even like a bow does it. Like I could have been learning to be like a bow elk hunter back in the day.
Right. Okay. But what I'm getting, so you got a rifle and a bow the same year?
No, that one was like 1 or 2 years later.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
I thought this was normal too.
Do you think he really wanted a son?
He got 2 of those.
Okay.
No, I think he liked having a
But
girl.
okay, so your parents were together for more than 10 years.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he already lived in Idaho when I was 10. They just
Okay.
hadn't gotten officially
Okay,
divorced.
okay.
You were asking something when I.
Well, so I was going to talk about China, right? So, like, how did they have a connection to China, or was it simple tourism, or was the reason tourism, or was there a different connection there?
Oh, why did he go there?
Yeah, it sounds like your mom went too.
Oh no, she didn't go.
Okay.
He went for work. He worked in
Okay.
purchasing, and so he would go manage like their accounts and
Okay.
create the connections of where they ordered the products for
Got it.
different companies.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I made an assumption and I thought your mom went too, so I was like, oh, they went for tourism or whatever.
But I'm named my legal name is Victoria, and I'm named that because of Victoria Harbor in Hong Kong.
Oh, interesting.
Because my dad wanted to initially name me Tori Pines after the golf course and the forest in San Diego area, or La Jolla, I guess. And my mom was like, we're not naming our daughter after a golf course.
It was actually a tree. It's actually a tree.
Well, but for him, it was the golf course. Right, it wasn't the tree.
So you got a harbor instead.
Yeah. I mean, it was because it was golf, and you probably would have told people. And she,
she was like, "No, you are not."
Victoria, and we can call her Tori for short.
Yeah,
no Pines in the middle name.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, Tori Pines would be like a place because the tree is a Tori pine, not like you don't.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
It's a type of pine tree.
Yep.
Have you been there to the harbor you're named after?
I have actually.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
Yeah, with my dad. Yeah, when I was like 18, I used to until like I used to see him a little bit more until like that. Like just gradually as I got older, we stopped. Things just changed quite a bit. I mean, I shouldn't say they just changed. I'm sure you've gathered my dad is an interesting person from the little I've shared. And we always kind of had a difficult relationship so as I got older and I like kind of understood the world and relationships and what I wanted it from relationships and like family members, I realized like patterns between our relationship that were very difficult for me. And I was like, oh, you have choices as an adult. You can choose to do things differently. And so I stopped putting in as much effort and was like, I feel okay about this. So that's sort of like how we became more estranged.
That makes sense. There's a saying for parents that when you're young, you idolize your parents. When you become like an adolescent or, you're not quite, I'll call it like a real adult, whether you're 18 or not, it's kind of irrelevant. And then during that phase, you demonize your parents. And then as you get older, you humanize your parents.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true for your relationship with your father, or would you put some edits in there?
It's probably most true with him. He's the parent that I think I felt more compassion and humanization of my stepdad and mom much sooner. But with my dad, he's the only parent like I've ever truly like. I got very angry once, and I wrote him an email after I'd moved to England after college, and I was just growing and changing a lot. And I found really great friend group there that felt like I really fit in there. And as I was like reflecting back, I was very angry. I was like, why aren't you a part of my life? Why don't you try? Why did you have a kid? Like, I don't know, and I'd never really been like that with anyone, because I had a difficult relationship with my stepdad too, but it was never to the same like degree of, I never got that angry or so. Yeah. So that's the closest I would say I got to demonizing, but I wouldn't even, that's probably too strong of a word.
Okay.
I was just like finally shared how I really felt.
Yeah, and maybe demonizing is maybe too strong of a word. It's just something I've heard. So, but I think demonizing is probably a little bit stronger word. But adolescents have, and even young adults have, it's like challenging with your parents because you're trying to push the boundaries, right? And like a lot of times you'll see yourself in your parents or see features, aspects about them, and so that you're like, I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
So then you're like pushing against it as an adolescent or a young adult, and they're pushing right back against you, right? Saying like, don't do that, don't try this, don't say that, and you're like, you're just trying to figure your place out in the world.
Well, it's funny though. Like I was a really boring kid. Like
Why do you say that?
Yeah, you talked a lot, so
I was boring in the sense that I pushed back about things like I wanted to hang out with my friends, or I wanted to be captain of the volleyball team, which meant that I had to go to every practice, like very like normal things. Like
I gotta play and I gotta go to the
grounded
practice.
from going to youth group. Like that was the things that got taken.
You
away from me.
you weren't. I wouldn't. I mean, we can get into it. We should actually. So do you think you were boring, or do you think you just didn't get in trouble? Like you weren't like doing bad things. There's a big difference between like somebody who's boring and somebody who's like not breaking the rules. I don't necessarily say you can be very interesting and still obey the rules.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I was very straight on the straight and narrow.
You're a rule follower.
I don't know if I was entirely. I would say I was a little more boring because I didn't realize, like, I took all the rules and stuff very serious, and I still am that way in a lot of ways, but I also realize now that, like, the world is a little less black and white.
We were talking about Tori's taxes earlier.
Which I pay an accountant to do who's very conservative.
Right.
To not include this. I follow too many accounting rules probably compared to the other business owner I talk to.
Okay. Anyway, I doubt that you were a boring kid. You just followed the rules.
Yeah. When Kai was saying his demonize to humanize, our buddy Chris just told us a story a week or two ago, and he knew his biological mom only until about 2, so he really never knew her, and then he met her when he was 47 for the first time, and he was saying that she seemed very nervous, and we were just thinking like, yeah,
wow.
I guess when you're really young and you have a kid, you might you're still a kid too, and I think by the time he's like, I'm 47-year-old man, I'm not mad at you. He's like, yeah, she was very nervous because she probably like did a lot of things that she didn't plan on having a kid, and then
whatnot.
Yeah. Anyway, I didn't know if that was like paralleled at all, like your evolution with your dad.
Yeah, I mean, it's different, I guess, because I was nervous to see him after 11 years, but again, like, I guess in a good scenario, you become your own person and build your own life and have your own sense of like acceptance and belonging and confidence, and so I kind of didn't care in some. I mean, I did. It would have still been like hurt, like, and I did spend time with him as a kid, and I mean, I was very, very, very upset as a kid as our relationship changed, and like even at a very young age, I like fought for it and be like, why are things different? Like, I would like ask him. I mean, I guess like when you say boring, I probably wasn't boring because I don't think every kid, like when they're like 11, is sitting their dad down and saying like, what has happened that we're going on, like we're not as close anymore. Like, is there something I can do to like fix this? So,
and there's like no kids that get grounded from youth group.
Yeah.
Do you want to know I got grounded from youth group for getting a ride home from school? My class of 100 kids who'd all gone to school since kindergarten together with a kid that my parents didn't know. That was why I got grounded from youth group.
And youth groups are like, it's religious, right? Yeah. Religious.
And I went to some people go to youth group just for like, I mean, I did go for socializing, but I was really into it. I was like, really loved Jesus and was very devout.
Well, you're not getting any Jesus this week after that move.
I went to Las Vegas in college and tried to convert people.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. With Campus Crusade or whatever that.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
called,
I know what Campus Crusade is. I've heard about it. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
what religion is this?
It was just like, my parents sent me to, when my mom got remarried, it was when I was going into 7th grade. And so that's when we moved to the Valley area. Westlake was, I mean, California a lot of parts of California that are more developed have diversity regardless. It's not like the same as like Bozeman, but it tends to be like more affluent diversity potentially. So like in Westlake, there was some diversity, but it was much more like affluent, I guess, in general, just like standard middle class affluence. But when we moved to the Valley, it was much more diverse, but not at all the same. Like, there was varying levels of wealth, and like, so my parents sent me to this private Christian school, not because they were religious, but because they thought I was too sheltered to go to public school, which was probably true. So that was how I ended up there. And the byproduct of that is they got a really devout Christian daughter who would try to convert them to.
That's, yeah, I guess that could backfire on your parents, you know,
So,
if they're not careful,
yeah.
or if they haven't thought it through.
So that's how I ended up there. And because we had to go to, I think they called it chapel once a week, and we had to take a Bible class, and then all the teachers are also religious, and so like we'd be in AP biology, and while we were learning about evolution, we were also like simultaneously being, so that we could pass the test, being told like the ways in which it's not like, and why the Big Bang is not a good theory and things like that, you know. And like when we would learn about like reproduction, it would also be like there would be a caveat of like, you don't need to practice having sex before you get married with your wife.
It just happens.
You know what to do, like biologically. So, you know,
first time,
really normal like education. We, all of us, like, so I'm still friends with a few people.
So, do not practice.
I'm still friends with someone who's friends with so many people, and when she got married, like all of us from that school got together, and we all talk about how we were basically like kind of a part of a cult. So yeah, interesting upbringing.
What were your besides Jesus? What were your interests as a young girl? Like, was it sports or art or music, or what were you into? What did you really like to do?
I like to play volleyball.
Okay. But you didn't want to go to practice?
No, I did. My stepdad was like, why do you have to go to all the practice?
Okay, yeah. Because I want to be the captain.
He was like, we want to go on family time. I don't know. It was very funny.
Okay, got it.
My coach actually let me out of one practice and like lied about where I was because he understood that I was in like, there wasn't really anything I could do.
Yeah.
And so he was like, we're just going to make up an excuse.
Okay.
I mean, in retrospect, it is also kind of silly that like a high school basketball team or volleyball team that's in a really small division in California where no one's really going anywhere. Like, does it really matter if your family wants to take you out of one practice?
It does not.
So now as an adult, I'm like, oh, that's kind of silly.
Well, yeah. But I mean, like a coach is like trying to teach discipline and dedication and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so I played volleyball. I really liked school. I liked learning and studying. I was a nerd.
What subjects did you really like?
I really liked chemistry. I loved chemistry.
Yeah,
so
you're
much.
a nerd.
And I loved English, and I loved history. I liked pretty much everything.
Okay, you're really a nerd.
I loved, thought it was so fun.
You got good grades.
Yeah.
Man, between following the rules and getting good grades, like I take it back. You're boring.
Very true. See, I told you. I was honest about it. You tried to convince me otherwise.
Yeah, Jesus, straight A's, and what was the other one?
Following the rules.
And following the rules. Yeah, boring.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so now you're basically like, are we in high school now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're in high school now. You went to Cal Poly.
Slow.
Yeah, she went to the real Cal Poly. Everybody, she didn't go to Pomona.
That is also a real school,
but not really. Let's not.
Where did you go to school?
Chico State.
Did they have classes there?
Well, not really. Somehow, my diploma's actually right over there. I found it the other day. So you went to Cal Poly, the real one. Slow. What was your major?
I ended up being English, but I was going to be like 10 things before that. I started out thinking I was going to be a doctor. Okay. I was a biology major or biochemistry major. And then I was going to be an epidemiologist. So I was thinking of switching to microbiology, and I did an internship with the county health department. Then I was going to be a physical therapist. I was going to be a philosopher and go to graduate school.
Okay.
I was all over the place.
Well, these are all very interesting careers for somebody who's boring.
Yeah, I mean they're all cool subjects, that's for sure. Okay, but that makes a lot of sense, right? Like you're at that age, you're getting exposed to all kinds of different stuff, and you're like, this is cool, that's also cool. I've never heard of this, and so you're like diving into those topics and thinking you might want to do them.
I started following less rules too.
Okay.
I wouldn't say like I went through like any sort of rebellious phase or anything. I wasn't like it was more just suddenly I had so much freedom, and I was still religious my first year of college.
That's when you went to Vegas and tried to convert everybody.
Yeah.
And then boom.
No, I mean, that was actually it was a really interesting experience, and I'd never tried to like act. And really in the end, that's not what we did. We just like went to the old strip and had interesting conversations with people for a really long time.
On the street.
Well, the old strip is like covered area. I don't know. I didn't even know.
I've been there.
Yeah.
But you're like talking to random people.
Yeah. Yeah. And really it ended up just being, I mean, honestly, in retrospect, it was just interesting to like talk to strangers.
Sure.
So, but yeah, that was I was going to be like a campus crusade Bible study leader or something. And then I went back home between freshman and sophomore year, and I don't really know entirely what it was. I think I've always liked to read, and I think I was realizing that a lot of the books that I liked are all about the human condition and the like ways people fuck things up no matter who they are. And that's essentially like what makes us human is all the imperfection. And then I actually really liked those things, and I was being taught to like that was all the stuff that made we should be ashamed of all of that.
Yeah, you're a bad person.
And maybe that's like only one like kind of limited interpretation, but that was the interpretation I was given. And I've later like grown more language around this, that I was raised in a very shame-based view of the world and religion and of humanity. And I realized that I, as a person, didn't actually connect or believe in that. So I pretty much like almost overnight was like, I think I'm done with this. And I called and said I didn't want to be a Bible study leader anymore. And then that was the first year I drank alcohol, because I was like, oh, I'm no longer it's okay if I want to drink.
Did you overcorrect for a while?
I did not know how to drink alcohol because I had never drank any of it. So I got into like the trouble that you get into, like one of the third times I got
Tori's lost. There's throw up in her hair. Yeah. She doesn't know where she's at.
I had like 4 shots, and I'd met like one guy like twice or whatever, and I called him a bunch of times drunk, and I was like, oh man.
And her flip phone is almost dead.
Yeah. That kind of thing.
But that thing would last for days, though. That thing would last for like a week without charging it.
That's true.
Remember that? You could charge them like once a week.
I remember when all I wanted was a flip phone, and now we've reversed.
I was going to ask you, Tori, how well do you remember your pitch to convert somebody?
Oh, I don't remember it at all.
I really wanted you to pitch me on it right now.
It was, I really didn't, even then I didn't like, now I do marketing, and I don't like direct pitching and I understand that there's a purpose and place for it, but I would say that striking up a conversation with someone in a random day to convert them to some religion who I'm never going to speak to again it's not I don't think that's like very socially responsible. Like, just talking to someone and showing that you care and are interested in their story without ever mentioning like you need Jesus, I think would be a much more responsible thing. If you lived in that community and you wanted to invite them into things and be there to support them.
Yeah, it would be a long-term relationship then.
Yeah. And an interesting thing, even though I'm not religious at all, actually, is I took like this servant leadership class, and we read this book called, I think, The Master Plan of Evangelism. And it was all about Jesus's ministry and the ways in which the modern church doesn't follow his ministry and the example he set. And I actually got really inspired by it because it made a lot of sense. Like, one of the main arguments it made was Jesus spent the majority of his time with the apostles. Like, he put everything into them. Like, and that makes sense because as humans, you have this, you feel our community is like who shapes us and who we're most influenced by and can be cared for. And now we do all this like big proselytizing, then you never talk to anyone after the fact. And it's like, that's not how we really work as humans. And so it was like the logical side of me was like, oh, this book is so cool. And the church I went to, which was a church that ran my school, I actually wrote the pastor a letter. Like, I was so stoked about like how we could change things and do things differently and care more about people.
Like change the entire like almost like marketing approach, if you will, or change like the whole probably like retainment approach, right? Like, let's actually help these people. That's not like pitch them for the next 5 minutes, and if we get them, we get them.
Yeah, like, let's do what people are really looking for, which is like to be cared for and to find a sense of belonging and know, like, that's most of the time. And it was so fun. Like, and I actually dated is probably too strong of a word. Like, briefly in high school, his like nephew or somebody, so he knew who I was, and he would always greet you when you came in and when you left. And I was like, did he not get the letter? Like, never acknowledged it. And I mean, he didn't, or who knows, like maybe they just ignored it because like some kid wrote you. But like that always like stood out to me as like, we're not willing to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is. I mean, it could have been just like a, no big deal, but like, if he's not going to respond to your letter, you're like, well, how invested is this guy in me?
Yeah. Or just in all the things you preach every Sunday.
So I kind of want to sit on this topic for a second. And the broader topic of like,
do you want to sit on it?
We'll allow it.
Okay. The broader idea of like that your environment shapes, I guess we'll just stick with like, your mentality and your thoughts and, what you think is right and wrong. And so you mentioned kind of going through a process of unraveling that and saying, hey, like, it's okay, I can drink some alcohol. And so you started to kind of question what you'd grown up, for your whole life to kind of learn. I would imagine that at the time it was difficult. But now, like, do you still struggle with that with understanding things about you? They're like, why do I think that? And maybe it's from 15, 20 years ago. Do you think some of that stuff still sits with you, or have you kind of shaken it off?
I mean, I still feel, I would say the way that it most sits with me is I definitely can feel bitter towards religion or be like very still angry about it. Like, it hits a nerve with me because I feel like sometimes there's just these blinders, and it's like abortion is probably a good example. Like, I dated someone who was in foster care. My stepbrother was actually adopted. Like, there are these people who are here right now who need support and help, and a lot, like, foster kids are so much more likely to need abortions, at risk of suicide, like all of these things. And they're really, really underserved, and we could put so much energy into helping. And instead, we're so fixated on like stopping abortion. And I'm like, why are we missing, like, why? And then I'll bring that, and I don't know, people, so like those things make me really angry because I'm like, you say all these things that you believe, but that's not what you're actually doing in real life. And because I was a part of it, like, I mean, I went to a sleepover at my friend's house once, and I ended up going to a walk for life in 7th grade where we went and prayed outside of abortion clinics. Do you think I had any idea what I was really doing or what was going on? No.
Right.
I just was like, abortion is bad.
You weren't old enough to know.
Like, and it's like we spent a weekend doing that when we could have, I mean, done something so much more beneficial.
Yeah, so you think what you're saying is that, like, the experience you had was, and if I'm wrong about this, correct me, but the experience that you had in the church and the folks that you were surrounded by we're hypocritical, right? It's like, I'm going to say, do these things, like treat people this way. But then in reality, they're not necessarily going out and helping people. They're saying, if you don't abide by this particular rule, then you are no longer accepted.
I mean, and I was a very black and white person, so I probably took it to some degree more like harshly, like than other people who would realize the world doesn't quite work as much that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I personally, that's how I felt.
Yeah.
Like, and I was close to a lot of my teachers, and I mean, they all knew I was very like religious, and I like was I took it seriously, and I was trying to at least be like authentic, like that it meant something to me. And so when I changed, I did feel like a lot of shame. Like, I can't go back there. They'll be disappointed. They won't. They'll think I failed. They'll try to like convert me again. Like, you know, or be like, I'm a terrible person. And I didn't want any of them to think I was a terrible person.
Sure.
So, yeah. But I actually have my sophomore English teacher who, they did this thing. If you were on student council, I don't know why, you had a prayer partner with a teacher. And so we would meet once a week and have lunch. I guess we probably prayed too, but I think we mostly just talked and had lunch. And I really loved her class, and her husband taught chemistry, and I loved his class. So I knew them really well. And she still follows me on Instagram and comments every so often, and she's very devout still. And so I always wonder like if she'll stop following me at some point, because I swear I allude to like lots of things and beliefs that she's not in alignment with. And it's funny that like, I mean, I still wonder like if she just commented this week, and I'm like, I wonder what you really think.
Or maybe she's more open-minded.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I have no idea.
She has a relationship with you, or had a relationship with you, and so she sees, you know, kind of the other side in some sense. And maybe she doesn't agree with all of what you're saying or whatever, and it's fine. I'm
sure some of it, my feelings and concern that they would think I'm the terrible people, these people I looked up to, and is my own like internalizate, like taking it to like not realizing that people are more flexible than that.
Yeah.
And so I can see that now, but I couldn't see that at all at the time.
Yeah.
So, but sometimes it can be that way. And I guess too, like if you think about the world we live in now online, so sometimes the only connections you have with these people from your past is what they post on social media. And people are willing to say in some pretty like brutal things, so that, and even if that's not like, if you met them in person, the conversation would look so different. I personally struggle with even people I know well, when they post like one thing like that, I don't know, during COVID, if you wear masks, you're just like the people before Hitler took power. You're like basically a Nazi, was what the implication was, or you would have been a Nazi supporter was the implication. And I'm like, okay, so I've worn masks and we're friends. Like, when I hang out with you, do you think I'm an idiot? Do you think I'm like, what is this? You know, and I think that's a mistake I make, forgetting that what we do, they're not the same. But that's something I still like struggle with as an adult. Like, I'm very confused by like, why would you say this if there's actually room for some flexibility? Or why is it that it's okay that I wear a mask and I can still be your friend, but like the rest of the world is a...
Sure.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think
there's probably just like not a lot of thought or nuance put into those types of posts or statements.
Yeah, or it could be a lot of things, right? I think people, it's like humans fool ourselves, right? Like we say we want two options, like in our mind, we want two options. I want this, or I want that. In reality, like nobody wants two options. Two options sucks. You want like you want an option here, 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 and here, and then you choose, right, which one works for you. So you'd have like 7 or 8 options, and they're a variation, like a spectrum of both of the two. And so I think people like we put ourselves in a box, even though we never want to be in a box. And I think for whatever reason, like we can't get away from that. I bring it up because I have a buddy who was in a very religious family, and he got in trouble for smoking weed a bunch of times in high school. And he was like super shamed for it. He got into a shitload of trouble. And this is at the time, right? This is 20 years ago when it wasn't legal anywhere. Society in general, like looked at it completely differently. And so he was a, 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. And that stuck with him for a long time because he went from like being a good kid to being a bad kid. Like his whole image in school, in his school district, with his teachers, with his coaches, with all the parents of the kids that he hung out with, all of a sudden he went from being like a normal kid to you're a bad kid. So he held that with him for like a long time. And it's interesting because, he's now 34 or 5 years old. And we were talking about this like last year, and he's like, dude, I still like feel like the shame of like, I did something wrong. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that is so wild that like you can hold on to something like that for so long. But what's also, and then, first off, like that's sad in and of itself, but also like society's completely changed their view on this. I mean, there's a shitload of people that are in jail for, some stupid 3 strikes rule of like you sold $100 worth of weed 3 times and got caught. And so you're like,
in prison, right?
You're in prison. Yeah. And so it's like, what?
Yeah.
There's people making billions of dollars off of this shit now, right? And it's illegal. And so that is like, there's something, the world's evolving, but you're holding this, somebody's holding this shame for 20 years of their life, right? So that's kind of why I was asking you about like, I would think sometimes it's kind of hard to be like, wait, is that right? Is that wrong? Where do I stand on that? Because like maybe your body's telling you one thing, but your mind is like fighting it. So you're like literally having conflicting thoughts within yourself about a topic that you know your stance on it, but your body feels different about it.
Yeah. I mean, I felt that way about having sex before getting married because that was a huge, like, basically there were 3
until you had sex.
3 takeaways. For a girl, the first time you have sex is always so amazing. Just we're gonna throw that in there. I'm gonna reality check.
No comment.
Say not the girls that was the first time with me.
Oh, okay, I'm sure. We're all of the age where it's very possible, girl. We're like, oh, I feel like I have to make this sound like I had the best time. Possibly I didn't. Anyway.
I'm from the East Coast. The girls are not nice there. I'll tell you exactly how it went.
Yeah, I'm West Coast all the way.
She's from the Valley.
Yeah. I'm a Valley girl. So much a Valley girl. But I felt like that was the one. Like they basically
a lot of shame around that.
You're not supposed to have sex before you get married. You're not supposed to drink, and you're not supposed to do drugs. I did start drinking, but for some reason I didn't feel very guilty about that. I just like in my mind I was like, I mean, I understood still some of the reasons why they were like, there are practical reasons why, like encouraging, like, oh, binge drinking isn't very good for you. Like you might make poor choices when you like, but that stayed with me for a very, very long time. It's funny you mention that because for some reason this morning I randomly like was thinking about this, and I was like, how I used to be like really stressed out about the number of people I slept with.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have no idea. I don't remember now. Like, it hasn't occurred to me. Not because I've like.
You just don't give a shit anymore.
It was just like, I was like, wow, that used to be.
You don't care about that number or whatever.
That I held over my head and like it made me feel like less of a person in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's stuck with me for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Like even like in Josh and I talked about this in the beginning of our relationship. Like there were still things that like. I was like, well, this is left over from, and he's like, wow. And I was like, yeah, I know that was such a long time ago, but it was a big part of education of you're not supposed to like.
Yeah. I mean, if you're told like, you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do this, and it's pounded into your head, like it's hard to get that out of your head.
And you're so impressionable when you're developing as a young adult teenager.
And I was a people pleaser too, so like, yeah.
You followed the rules.
And I took things to like heart, like, oh, this is really how I'm supposed to be. So yeah. But and that's like going back to your comment about hypocritical. And I'm sure this wasn't intentional. Like I liked a lot of my teachers. Like I still do. A lot of them were really great teachers. Mm-hmm. You could feel how much they cared about you, and they had lots of positive impact. But I do also think about like I've reflected a lot as I grew up. Like, why was my main takeaway about like success as a person was not drinking, not doing drugs, and not having sex before marriage? When there's a lot bigger things that comes to like being a human who is a good person and like a good part of society and growing up and like connecting with others. But like there's so much more that is so much more important and meaningful and like harder to figure out and navigate in life.
Way harder.
And I'm like, why did we focus on that? Like it's much harder to be the person when like I don't know, you were mentioning something about when you're like body, you feel you know what is right, and then it's the uncool thing to do. Like how do you navigate that? And like we talked about some of that but like that's even as an adult now, it's still hard. Mm-hmm. So like that was another like I guess criticism, or like I wish you could see how this felt as a kid versus like what we actually really need to grow up and navigate the world and do as little harm as we can in our time here.
Yeah.
It's so weird. You just think as an adult, like teaching kids, you would come to these conclusions and teach that and not just keep teaching stuff that's so flawed.
Yeah.
I'm going to use the restroom real quick. We're going to cut that out, or you can
No, it's going to stay in.
Okay. Do you need to use the restroom at all? Okay.
If you want to grab me one of those LaCroix when you get up there.
I will. Anybody need anything else? Okay. You guys should talk about the kid you're mentoring.
Well, I was going to say, I was thinking before when Kyle was asking you about religion and if you like carry stuff now from that, because I grew up my family going to church. I think by the time I was like 13 or 14, I was digging my heels in every weekend. I would try to find any excuse in the world not to go. And then I just totally stopped by the time I was old enough to drive, 16. And I always see it now. I'm like, I have so much of a bias towards religion. And I hear the statement now a lot more as an adult is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Mm-hmm. So I always think, yeah, there were some good principles. And my mother's even said, she goes, I kind of wanted you kids to catch the spirit of religion. Yeah. And I thought it was very well put. If you're just trying to get the essence of being a good person, but most people will like religion comes up and I almost just discount them immediately.
Yeah, I have a hard time taking it. I mean, I guess as seriously too and get frustrated, especially when like it causes your viewpoints. Like I loved like that. Again, I still really liked that book, The Master Plan of Evangelism, and the way it talked about modeling like building community essentially is probably the language I would use now, and how like we mentor people, like all of those things. Like it made me really excited. There were a lot of things about like Christianity and loving people, and like I mean if you look at like Jesus, like he hung out with it's like what is that? He came back to the table. I was like, oh, it's funny. I don't know, like how he treated everyone the same no matter who they were, and the lack of judgment, and you could make mistakes and it was fun, like because that's what we all do anyway. So I still like admire that. And for a long time I ended up like randomly, even in my career, like always going to events where everyone was Christian but me. Like one time I went as a photographer to a multi-day photography retreat in Colorado Springs, and I didn't know the people who put it on were Christian, but literally we sat in a circle on the first day and you had to introduce yourself, and literally every single person ended with, and I love Jesus Christ, my savior. And I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm just like how is this part of like where I'm from? And be like, and I'm straight. Like,
yeah.
you know, yeah. So it was just like I was like, okay, well, I'm a photographer who's from Montana. Cool.
That's it. Yeah, you're like, yeah.
I mean, they were all really great, and it was super, like, it was actually an amazing experience, and we had interesting conversations about like how my beliefs and how they changed and whatnot. But I was just like having flashbacks to growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Are you gonna accept me because I'm not, and also don't try to convert me because I'm not into it.
If you study the Bible at all or like hear any of the stories about Jesus, it sounds like a great guy. Like assuming he's real and like who knows, this is thousands of years ago, and stories from a week ago get mixed up in translation. So I can only imagine. But he seems like everything you'd want everyone and your kids to be. But
yeah.
Like I feel like that's the whole point that's always missed, and the rest is just a bunch of dogma and just weird stuff.
Yeah, it is very. It's been cool though. People I know who have stayed in their religion or tried to change it. Like one of the women who was at that retreat, her brother is he's a devout Christian, but he's gay, and so he worked really hard in his church to like change the way things were viewed and all of that. And so I think it is cool that there has been some evolution and like growth, but I wish it could go a little further. Like I think we can see like right now, like all this stuff, it's like, and I know the media like blows a lot of things out of proportion and whatnot, but I mean, I had a friend whose she was pregnant and she lives in Idaho, and she found out that her child had a chromosomal defect that pretty much guarantees they'll die if they make it through full pregnancy. And it was right after Roe v. Wade was overturned, and then they told her, we don't know what we can do for you. And like when you've just gotten this traumatic news, like your child is basically gonna like, that's so, and then to not know like what are my like, and then have to deal with that pressure of, I might have to go to another state. And like if you grew up religious and you already feel like, I'm sure if I had to have an abortion in life, because that was such another thing I grew up with, that would be very hard for me to make and not feel like an awful person. So I was just like that, like I know a real life person, and it's like, it's crazy that this person has done, like they're married, they want their child, but their child isn't going to live. And your healthcare provider is like, I'm not sure what we can legally do for you. And that just seems so removed from like, you know, what is the point of healthcare? Like, what are we doing that it's gotten so crazy that we're willing to like, I don't know, that we got to this way of viewing things. And some of that stems from our ties to religion. And even though
that's a whole topic we could go down.
Yeah, we don't need to go down it.
The healthcare topic.
It's just,
I think just people need to remember, you are the customer and you're the paying customer. So you're in charge. Well, that's how it should be, in my opinion. It's like you are paying them to do what you want them to do. They should do it. Yeah. In a sense, right? Like you are literally the paying customer. You bought insurance.
Yeah. Too bad it doesn't work that way.
Insurance you got to fight for it. You got to fight for it.
Oh, they said you should get an MRI. We want you to do this instead for 3 months. Yeah. Oh, look, nothing has changed after, now you've done 6 months of PT. I guess we'll approve the MRI that we're also not even going to pay for because your deductible's so high.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Fun. We don't have to talk about that.
Okay, so now you gotta, so we're going to finish college real quick. What did you get your degree in?
English.
Okay, so you got a degree in English. Okay, you get out of college. You graduate from the real Cal Poly, and where do you go? What do you do? What are you thinking at this point in time? Like, what are you going to do with yourself? Are you excited? Are you terrified?
So I, as you noticed, tried all these different ideas of what I was going to be when I grew up, and I didn't really know. I ended up being an English major because those were the classes I was the most excited about. And it worked for me to still graduate on time because there was a lot of like electives. So I got that degree and wasn't 100% sure what I would do with it. And I think it's also important to note that I did not get as good of grades in college. I got a little like,
You became cooler.
Because you started drinking.
It started before there was anything like that. I was just like, oh, I can do whatever I
You
want
became
with my
interesting.
time.
You became interesting.
Also,
Like, oh, there's options.
all-nighters don't always work so well. Chemistry was harder in college.
Yeah.
Or some of my professors were maybe like, I needed to read the book and it was a little hard to understand. So that was harder. Like, so I don't know. I felt kind of lost. I felt very lost.
Cal Poly is a competitive place too.
Yeah.
So there's good students there.
And it got better as it got better for the last few years. I kind of got it more together. But it still was different. I learned a lot about my poor time management skills.
Hold on. You learned a lot, or you became aware?
Oh, aware.
You became aware of your poor time,
which I've still been working on for the last 2 decades.
Didn't you do really well for the birthday party?
Yeah, she did.
Yeah,
What
for
birthday?
Kyle's.
For
dinner.
but you also like went.
She was on time. You were earlier.
But also
on time.
you were at something at Rick and Haley's.
No, we
recently.
were
You were on time.
Oh yeah, I showed up to Emily's house on Friday, and she kept saying how shocked she was that I was on time. She was like very confused. She's like, "I am so surprised. I thought I had a lot more time. I can't believe you're here. Why are you here?"
Well, we're here to prop you up and celebrate your runs.
Yeah.
At the Kyle and Tim podcast.
Also late on time to my run with Stacy today, which she also felt the need to comment on.
So she has learned.
Stacy should know better, right? She should, whatever the time is, she should adjust it by 30 minutes.
No, I'm not that late to our runs.
Okay, 20 minutes, 15.
10.
Okay.
She's also sometimes late.
Okay.
I can sometimes count on her. Like, I don't even have to text her that I'm late because I get a message from her that she's late. I mean, are you always on time, Tim?
Generally,
yeah. I can see that.
But
he runs a business based on time.
Kyle is also on time. In fact, I talked about you on our run because I turned around so that I could be mostly on time. And I was like, Kyle is always on time. He's early to parties. I had to tell him to not show up early to parties in my
Yeah. Well, now I know just to show up like, depending on what it is, anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes.
Now I call you and be like, you want to come help me?
Yeah. Well, I should help you because you've made a lot of good food for me.
So I didn't know what I wanted to do. That was the questions. And
okay, so you get out of college.
But I studied abroad.
And you're figuring all these things out. That's right. You did study abroad. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that experience because that was formidable.
Formidable?
Right?
Formidable. Or formidable?
Formidable.
I'm not an English major.
Formidable is like something you're afraid of. I don't
Look, you were the English major. I went to Chico State.
Hang on.
And I did not study English.
I wants to share.
So whatever the word I was trying to use, that's the one I'm
Formative is what you mean.
Yeah.
Formidable is like a formidable opponent, like someone you're afraid is going to beat you.
Well, maybe that experience was that too.
No, it was great.
Okay.
Kyle, don't you remember you told me about the job interview with the adversarial relationship?
Yeah.
Tell that story quick.
No, I'm gonna.
It's quick.
No, wait. I want to know the adversarial.
So
wait.
Okay, so I thought the word adversarial meant like partnership, friendship, like we get along, we're on the same team. And I used that word in an interview, and the expression on that person's face like went like blank because I used it completely incorrectly. And I didn't realize that until like weeks or months after the interview. And I was like, I am an idiot.
What was the context of it? Because you told me it. It's pretty funny.
Well, it was talking about like, basically hiring an outside consultant that would be what I was using the term incorrectly, right? And so I was saying like, hey, no, like I'm going to help you guys. Like I'll be your adversary. Because that's what I thought the word meant. And it doesn't, just so everybody knows, it doesn't mean that. It means the exact opposite. It means I'm going to be against you and not helpful to you. And so,
want to hire.
So I'm literally telling this person that I'm trying to get money from so they can hire me as a consultant that I'm going to be their adversary. and we're gonna have an adversarial relationship. And he's like, what?
You always tell me you're the smartest dumb person you'll ever meet, and I feel like that's like also you're like he's like good at poker, and he's like trying to make everyone like underestimate him.
I'm not good at poker. If I win a poker hand, it's because I got really good cards. Luckily, they were handed to me, literally.
Is that how poker works?
Okay, so I sorry to interrupt what you were saying to hear that story, but
let's talk about your
formidable.
your formidable
let's
experience.
God dang it. Yeah, let's talk about your experience in Europe, regardless of the word.
Well, I went to Australia, so we'll start.
Oh, okay. My bad. I thought you went to Europe. My bad.
Went to Australia. I wanted to. This is funny. I actually got accepted for my junior year to go study abroad in Italy. But then I met this guy, and then I didn't go for him. And it's something that I've like been like, why? But oh well. I ended up my senior year. I went anyways, even though I was dating him. I was like, I'm going to Australia. It was so amazing. It was so fun. It was kind of not school. We only had to we got 4-day weekends every weekend.
Which city?
In Brisbane.
Okay.
And then that was a very formative experience.
All right. Hey.
Probably aspects of it were maybe a little formidable.
Sure.
But mostly formative.
I love it.
It was so fun. I loved the girls I got forced to room with. By chance, not forced. And it was just, the drinking age there is 18, but because I had a boyfriend in the US, it was the first time, and I had been dating him for 2 years. It was the first time I ever went out on my own, and because we had an accent, everyone wanted to talk to us, and we're young and dumb, and so I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah. You're like, hell yeah.
Yeah. So it was really, and I was doing I mostly did video and writing classes, so it was real work, but it was really fun. So it wasn't real work.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great time. I felt like I got to be a different version of myself. You know how when you're in front of all these people who don't
know you. Yeah. You don't have an identity.
And it wasn't that it wasn't a real version of me. It was just the friend group and people I hung out with. I did that classic thing of trying to be friends with people who I really shouldn't have been friends with, who were not because they were cooler than me per se, but we didn't even have that much in common, but I tried to impress them. So I ended up with kind of a odd group of people. And when I went to Australia, I was older and I felt confident traveling. And so the first weekend we were there, we were all had this backpacker vision of, we're just going to get on the train and then we're going to find a place to stay when we get there. And everyone is following me. I know what I mean. I had traveled already, but
that's not really a thing in Australia, right?
Well, it can be
but depending on where you're at.
But we didn't know anything, and it was there was a big football game or something that was so everything was sold out, so there was nowhere for us to go. So most everyone took the train back to Brisbane, and me and a few other girls met some guys on the beach and convinced them to let us stay with them, which is very responsible.
Hey. Whatever.
And we were all we all have boyfriends, so none of us are going to sleep with you. And they're like, we're going to sleep with you. They didn't sleep with us. I was really disappointed to learn that all of us were recovering religious kids. And we're no, we're not going to sleep with you.
That's hilarious.
But there you
go. They had to try. Yeah. They had to try.
I'm pretty sure every weekend looked like that for them.
Yeah. Yeah, A for effort for the Australian guys.
They were actually Kiwis.
Oh.
Who were living
A for the New Zealand dudes.
Yeah. So there you go.
Well, I think traveling is like that always, right? Traveling is if you're not with people or you don't know well, you get to explore a different part of yourself.
Yeah, and that really shaped so much because that led to what I did next after college. I didn't know that there was such a thing as a gap year because that wasn't really something you did in the US. And so I learned about how common, because we did travel quite a bit on the weekends after that. but we would book accommodation before we left. It worked a little better.
Just to back up, put yourself in those guys' shoes. 3 foreign girls are like, "Hey, we don't have any.
I don't have to put myself in the shoes. I know exactly what is going on.
Can we stay?
100%. Like, yes, you can stay with us. 1,000.
Oh, you have a boyfriend? Yeah. You can
By the way, you can sleep in my bed. Yes.
Yeah. We were really naive though and didn't think like that.
There's 3 college girls. Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Yeah.
From another country.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I interrupted. Gap year.
Oh. I was really naive though, Tim. My brain really didn't think that way. I didn't realize that by telling them I wasn't going to sleep with them, that it would increase the challenge.
Every time I've heard that.
Yeah.
I really didn't sleep with them. They're like, and then they were like so confused. Yeah. Being young and dumb. But so I learned, I don't know, and they also gave us time at the end of the quarter. Our quarter ended shorter than normal so that we could have time to just travel, which a lot of people would probably be like judgy of that and be like, oh, you weren't really getting an education. What better education is there than like
going around the
traveling on your phone and meeting people and like navigate, like, you know,
that is the real world.
Yeah. And so
as far as like real general life skills.
Yeah. And then like when you're traveling in a foreign country, there's so many things that you learn. You have to figure out that are different.
Mm-hmm.
There's like social things. There's like operational things where like, wait, they're like their train system doesn't work the same, or their bus system doesn't work the same. Like your brain is like on fire.
Yeah. And even though
when you're traveling in a foreign country,
and even though like it's Australia, so everyone speaks English, and there's still just like little things that you're noticing that makes you start to realize, especially I think like it's different now because there's so much social media and the world.
People were like dressed differently then.
Yeah. Like
there was so much stuff that was different.
We were blown away that we had to go buy like nice shoes to get into nightclubs because they weren't allowed. We were like, what is this?
They wouldn't allow sandals or
whatever. Yeah. Like we had to look nice enough to be let into them. We're like, what? Like we're from slow, like the beach. Like you didn't really dress up to go out.
Sure.
So like, you know, just like little things. But it like opens your I think it's very important as an American, especially to like realize even places that you think are so similar, like how, the world, we're all just like very similar and different at the same time. And like the way we do things isn't the way to do things. But during those, every time we traveled, we would meet all these other, a lot of female solo travelers and male too, but the females stood out to me because I just didn't know this was the thing you did. From who were taking gap years or doing working holidays, from all like they were Brazilian women, they were Germans, they were Swedish, they were from like South Korea, like, and I was like, wow, you can do this. This is like amazing. And they'd been to places like Thailand and Vietnam and Cambodia. And at the time, like going to Thailand was not a thing most Americans did. Like that got discovered. Or not discovered, but like became more common.
Like 10 years later.
Safe. Yeah. And so I was like, I can do this, like too. And so when I came home, since I didn't really know what I wanted to do yet, I was like, I'm going to just save up as much as I can. And I'm going to take a gap year because I was thinking at the time I'd go to graduate school. And I was like, I'll take a gap year beforehand. And so it was very formative because of I never would have considered that probably otherwise. And then that was all I wanted to do. So
I would imagine that like there's like a rush of emotions at that time when you meet all these young women that are basically the same age as you, right? Like within a year or two or whatever. And it probably blew your mind of like, wait, first off, they're alone and they're fine for the most part. They're fine. They're from all over the world, and they're doing like this shit that like would seem like super wild and like exotic.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff like places you never even heard of, and you're like, wait, where is that? Like, wait, let me see those pictures.
Yeah. I mean, literally, I had a boyfriend, but I met a guy on, of course, a booze cruise. alcohol was really expensive there too, and we weren't used to that. So like that was, and none of us had like a lot of money to spend, and food, the cost of everything was a lot more expensive there because wages were higher. Like you'd go to McDonald's and like it was $11 for a burger, which might seem normal now.
But then it was like $4, $5.
Well, no, it was still like most people got paid like $20 an hour, even in minimum wage. And so the cost of things were a little shocking. And they also have like, because they're part of the Commonwealth, like they have a special alcohol, like the shots are regulated very heavily in the size of them, and so they put less alcohol in like cocktails and stuff.
That's because all Austrians are degenerates.
Austrians or Australians?
Australians.
Still, the second one still sounds like Australians.
Australians are all degenerates.
So are a lot of Americans.
I know. I'm just
in their 20s who learned Chico State.
Yeah.
Or Cal Poly.
Right.
Let's talk about the largest Mardi Gras celebration west of.
Is it a Cal Poly?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Didn't know
they
that.
shut down the like main train line one year because everybody was on the train.
Like the Amtrak?
No, like transport of goods. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
like,
whatever.
In the middle of the night. Which is a really big deal.
Huge deal.
Because so many crazy people were. Train tracks is where you want to hang out.
Yeah. That was a cool idea, whoever's idea that was. Shout out to whoever orchestrated that.
It wasn't even on purpose. It was just what happened. And then people climbed up on the train and were just like...
I kind of remember this now.
Throwing stuff and it was right by the apartment complex I lived in, so I got a full front seat view to it. It was wild.
Cool.
Yeah. But I met this guy and he was really nice, and I told him when I had a boyfriend, but I did like him, and he whatever, not surprising.
He said alcohol's expensive. I need free drink.
Anyways, though,
can I sleep in your bed but not sleep?
Exactly. Did not sleep with him. I'm sure he was very shocked by it.
He was frustrated. Sexually frustrated for sure.
He showed me all the photos. He had taken more than one gap year, and he was showing me the photos, and I was like, they were in Israel, they were in Bolivia, they were.
And then you had sex with him.
No, still did not.
He's like, look, these girls slept in my bed.
Still did not.
All these.
Still did not.
You're like, this guy's the coolest fucking guy ever. Nah, I will sleep with him.
Nope, didn't. I was like, I couldn't believe it was real. I was literally looking at the photos thinking they were fake. And this is before it was so easy to Photoshop everything. Literally couldn't believe it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would completely. You're like, I've never seen these photos. I've never heard about these places. Never even heard anybody talk about them. Never seen a picture of them.
And this is almost. I'm 39, so this is. I was 21, so 18 years ago. And wow, the way Americans travel has changed really significantly in that time period.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't uncommon to go on a Euro trip after graduation or something in the summer, but you always went to Europe, and it was a couple of weeks, and you weren't going to in Africa and sleeping in tents and going on this river trip and going to India and obviously some people were, but it wasn't as quite the same way it is now. So it was a bigger deal because you didn't have influencers traveling the world telling you this was possible.
Yeah.
So
cool. Yeah, it's really cool.
I gotta pee now.
Okay. All right. So
my parents were not in favor of this decision after college.
Of the gap year.
What? No, I'm good. Thank
you. I'm good. They were not in favor of the gap year.
No.
They probably didn't understand it.
No.
Right. They didn't, which would be hard for them to understand. Why would they? They didn't do anything like that in their life. Yeah. They probably don't run in those crowds at that time, whatever.
Well, and when I moved to England, I decided to go to England to start my gap year because at the time there was a special work visa for people who had just graduated or been in university, and so you could work. And should I wait for Tim to come back? I just kept talking.
No, keep going. Keep going.
I missed him though. He's still like level. Like his brain is probably not spiraling.
Why?
He's not alluded to the.
You don't think that he's crazy, just like you and I?
Oh well, yeah. There's different ways that we manifest that. Don't you think?
For sure.
He probably is. I don't know him very well.
Yeah, he's crazy. So they didn't understand the gap year.
I mean, my mom, I don't know how my mom was always very supportive of me, and I think I'm kind of always wasn't surprised that I sort of did things a little differently. But my stepdad was not in favor of it, and
he was scared.
I'm sure. And I mean, when at the time that I was moving to England, the pound was 2 to 1, so it was very expensive, and it was like, well, how does she expect?
Yeah.
You know, and until that point,
which is just like another excuse to like say no.
Yeah,
it's too expensive.
And to be fair, to that point, my parents had supported. Like, I didn't pay for college myself.
Mm-hmm.
I had a job and I contributed like some, but it was very minuscule. Yeah. So I can understand that, but I did just fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I even stayed longer than planned.
Yeah, I mean, I think let's talk about that a little bit. So, like, I would imagine that their concerns were based out of fear for your safety, fear of the unknown, and you probably couldn't explain it to them, right? Like when you could get into like an argument, a debate with them, I want to do this because this, and this, and they hear what you say, but they don't really hear what you say.
Yeah. Mm. So, and I mean,
because they weren't flipping through the pictures, and they didn't meet all the women from all over the world that have been traveling, and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, nobody does that. Those people are stupid anyway.
Yeah. So you're supposed to get a job after college.
Mm-hmm.
Find a partner and get married and buy a house and a car and have children. I mean, that's changed quite a bit, but
yeah,
I still feel like a lot of people feel comfortable with that life trajectory. I mean, like, I think about if I had kids, would I be super stoked if they went and did that? I guess it's hard because you can have a lot of faith and trust in your kids. Like, it was easier though because it was myself and I was confident. I had no doubt. I was like, this is fine. I've got this. Like, I wasn't worried at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting because I left a year, almost to the day that I left for Australia, and I was sitting in the same terminal at LA. And when I went to go to Australia, and I'd signed up for this study abroad program at the last minute because they still had some spots, and I would have never chosen Australia. It was just that, like, it would allow me to still graduate on time, and it wasn't super expensive. So I was like, I want to do this thing, parents. Can we do this? Can we make this happen? And so I was hoping that when I went to LAX to go to leave for Australia, that my mom would tell me I didn't have to go and I could stay home because I suddenly felt very terrified.
Okay, yeah, at the last minute.
And then it was so funny when a year later, almost to the day, I'm sitting in the same, I feel like this is the only next choice I can make, and no fear whatsoever, even though this time I'm not going to like a program. I don't have like school line. Like, I had to go find a job and find a place to live. And I mean, I was lucky that I met when I was working in a restaurant, a girl who was 2 years behind me, and she was going to study abroad in England. And she was like, you can come stay with me or come visit me. And I was like, sure.
Yeah.
And little did I know that she was half British, so like her family picked me up from the airport, and I did live on in her dorm. I think I rented the cot for the longest time, and the dorm is like, do you still have that cot? It's like, yep, still have that cot. We'll give it back eventually. But yeah, it was very different and funny how things change in a year.
Yeah.
This might skip a lot, but how long have you been in Bozeman?
I've been in Bozeman for 7.5 years, but I lived in Big Sky for 7 before that. So I've been in this area So
you've been out here So how old were you when you moved to Big Sky?
I feel like I was 25 or 26. I moved here on a whim. It was like just to continue my like nomadic life of I was seeing new places. Because I took the gap year and it was more than a year, and then I came home for a little bit, and then I went back to England, and like with the plan of like potentially staying or going somewhere else. When I moved here, I thought I was going to go to South America for a year after I saved up enough money. But then I stayed and started a business.
Do you ski or snowboard?
I do now.
So you didn't have any background of snow, winter sports?
I skied a little bit when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But when my parents split, it was really my dad's side of the family. And then I tried to learn to snowboard, but I was terrible at it. And I didn't own any of that stuff. So when I moved to Big Sky, I used like my cousin's stuff. The first time I went snowboarding, I didn't have like gloves, real gloves, or goggles. And it was not a sunny bluebird day in spring. It was a very overcast, blizzardy day.
I couldn't see shit.
and my cousin, who lived in Big Sky, went with me. And she traded me her goggles for my sunglasses because at least she knew how to snowboard. But she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Hi, I've skied in California at Sierra Summit, aka Sierra Cement, where it's so warm most of the time."
Yeah.
I learned quickly that it was slightly different.
Yep.
So yeah.
So I'm trying to think, what year would that be? 14 years ago. So that was like 2010
or
roughly?
9. I think it was very soon into the like housing crisis.
Yeah. What drew you out here?
My aunt and uncle live in Big Sky.
Okay.
And I'd been once in college to visit them, and my uncle had owned a hotel and restaurant, and he's like, "Our servers make $150 a night or $200." My aunt's like, I had serving experience. She's like, "You should come sometime for a season." And then I didn't. But then when I was, after living abroad the second time, I was really miserable in the LA area, and I wanted to go back to England, but I needed to go to school or do something to like get a true work visa. And so I was applying to graduate school, but it was going to be a while. So my aunt, she was visiting my grandmother, and she's like, "Oh, you're unhappy? Why don't you come to Big Sky?" And because at that point I said yes to pretty, like it didn't matter. It could have been like new. Omaha, and I would have said yes to. Yeah. I'm like, "Well, I haven't been there. Sure, I'll experience something different. I want to be in Nebraska. Like, why not?" I had no plans of staying here. And it's funny that because you asked about skiing and snowboarding, and people like always assume, "Oh, you came for a winter and stayed." It's like, no. I didn't ski a ton at all. I only learned to ski a few years ago, really properly. So, yeah.
Are your aunt and uncle still up there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's cool.
Second family to me now, and their kids I'm really close to.
How long did you work at Bucks?
I think
I didn't know it was Bucks. Now this is all starting to make sense. Connecting so many dots right now.
That's why I know Haley.
Yeah.
Yeah. She lived in the house that my aunt and uncle owned from their kids going to Bozeman High School. And then for college, I met her at that house because she was living with my roommates. And then she ended up working at Bucks, so I got to know her more through that. But yeah. I worked there, I think, only a little, 3 seasons, because I was really into photography already.
Mm-hmm.
And this was back before every business had used social media for their business.
Yeah.
And because I like to take a lot of photos, I was like, "You should put some of these on Facebook." And so they started to use some of my stuff, "Here's tonight's special, here's this and that." And then at one of the events I met a wedding photographer who I really admired, and someone was like, "You should talk to maybe it was my uncle, you should talk to my niece." And he did, and then I ended up working for him. And I was supposed to stay working at Bucks and take on a marketing role. But I really wanted to be a photographer. That was actually one of my great failures, was of a time of poor time management, taking on more, and also taking on more responsibility than one could handle.
Yeah.
And so
trying to run a new business.
Well, I worked for a photographer, but I also still had this role at Bucks, and I didn't really follow through on it. And it was through my uncle too, and my uncle's someone I really admire. And we had to have a difficult conversation about how I really let him down. And Which sounds like funny now to think, but I was like I knew it. It felt really awful. And for a long time, it felt awful. Now I'm like, oh, I was growing up. That's what you do when you grow up. You do really dumb things because you don't understand that you can only do so much and that you have like limitations. So, yeah.
I gotta go again.
How do men have smaller bladders than women?
No, just one's like.
Oh.
So what was the great failure? Did you like show up late for a wedding you were shooting or something?
No, it was that I was supposed to take on other responsibilities at Bucks. Like, I still worked in the restaurant, but I was supposed to do like stuff with the marketing. And so I would like commit to doing certain things and then I wouldn't end up doing them. And they weren't like of the highest priority. So you could kind of like, they didn't affect like day-to-day operations. So you could sort of get away, like it would keep getting pushed off. And then anyone who runs a hotel or restaurant, you're always pulled in a million different directions. So you don't have the time to keep up with like people like me who aren't following through per se.
Yeah.
So, and my uncle's he's the kind of person who, if he says he's going to do something, he will always do it. Probably even if it meant he might like die. I mean, not if it's actually unsafe, but like if it took so much stress, he would still probably. And so, like, and he extends more kindness and compassion and empathy to other people. Like he doesn't have those same expectations, but I definitely knew I was letting him down and that I should have said earlier on, I'm overcommitted and I can't do all of this. And I want to be a photographer, but I also like kind of wanted to work in hotels and restaurants. I thought I had managed a restaurant in England, but yeah.
I think that's kind of what you do though when you're younger. You kind of like stretch your capabilities and you see how much you can do, and then you get a little bit older and you learn to dial it back to where it's realistic and manageable. But you kind of have to know, like, you have to learn that there's only one way to learn the limit, and that's
this is my biggest life lesson since college. Still working on wow, it takes so much longer to do this than I thought.
There's certain things I do that I would like way overestimate or underestimate the reality of how long something will take.
So 2000, what year was it when you started the photography business on your own?
2010 or 11. Because even though I worked with another photographer, I was always an independent contractor. Mm-hmm. And so all the weddings I did were through my business. So
okay. Yeah. You just teamed up with him in the beginning.
I helped him, like he opened a studio space and I like helped him with his admin and like just like an assistant because he'd grown enough where he needed more help. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And I wanted so desperately like to be a wedding photographer that I was a perfect candidate. Mm-hmm. In fact, I pretty much like forced him to hire me by like doing a lot of free work. Be like, let me do that. Let me research this for you. Let me do all of these things. Mm-hmm. He's like, sure, I'll take some free work.
Sure.
Yeah. I always think that's the best way to, like, if there's something you want to do or be, or like, even if it's your own business, go work for somebody that does it. It's like, there's not really like, there's no way you're going to learn faster than working for someone you aspire to be like, or do what they do anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was a funny person, so it was like we couldn't be like more opposite. Even though like I struggle with time management things, like I have the understanding that it impacts other people and like it matters sometimes, like especially if you're photographing someone's wedding.
You have to be on time for the wedding.
It's helpful, like you don't want to stress the bride out. And he was so
like late to everything.
And just like, well, kind of just all like he was like what you imagine, like when people stereotype like a creative person.
Okay, yeah.
Fit more that. So it was we were like a funny like pairing because even though I like struggled with some similar things, like I would get like noticeably angry and be like, oh my gosh, and it's just like, oh, let's stop and get a coffee.
Yeah.
I was like,
you're like, no, we're late for this wedding. We're supposed to be there 30 minutes ago.
I'm gonna have a panic attack. Yeah, so it was funny it was a lot of fun too. It was just like very funny. It's like, you need a work wife to keep you in line. I'm better at that for other people than I am myself, which I guess is probably true for a lot of
You
people.
need a work wife too.
I guess a work husband also.
Yeah.
That was like 2010. That was right around. It was like 9 or 10 was the first time I came out here. My sister was in school out here. It's a very vague memory, but everything seems so comparative to today, like so chill and laid back out here.
Yeah.
Like just kind of quiet. I know there's obviously money out here and there's great skiing, but it just seemed pretty chill.
Yeah. It was
especially Big Sky.
It was very different. Very different. Like people were like begging you to rent their Firelight apartment, which is wild to think about. Now you're like, there's nowhere. Literally, I can't find a single place to rent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was very different. I was wondering how you came out here first. Is because your sister?
Yeah, my sister went to school here. That was I just came out to visit once, and I've kind of wanted to and have since, obviously, but I wanted to move out here since then.
When did you move out here?
I guess it'll be like 5 years ago this coming fall.
When did you move here again?
2019.
So 5 years ago?
Yeah.
In January?
I moved in January 2019.
Yeah, I moved the fall that same.
So a few months after. Or 9 months after, I guess.
Are you still doing photography now?
Mm-hmm. But different. I was a like full-time wedding and family photographer for a decade. And then I wanted to change. And I didn't know exactly what that was. I knew, like, I started to get to know Kyle around that time, actually. One time we went climbing, and I was like, also because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I'm one of those people that, while very self-reliant, I have a really hard time, like, just to make money, like, doing things I really hate or don't feel passionate about. And so I'd been, like, doing less stuff, but I didn't know what else I wanted to do. Like, I wasn't, like, actively promoting to try to get more weddings, which would have, like, solved financial problems. And one time Kyle and I were climbing, and he's like, and I was like talking about, I'm like, I really need to figure something out with my business. I really got to make some more money. And Kyle's like, how much money do you need to make? And I was like, well, I think about that sometimes. And I'm like, wow, that was such a small amount of money that I thought I needed to make. And I was like, that would have made all the difference then. And now I'm like, huh. But I guess it's also because things
Can you
cost
say
less.
that again about doing work you love or you hate for money? I just like it for some reason I didn't hear that correctly.
I have a hard time if I don't feel passionate or like in alignment. I mean, I can do things I don't like because we all have to make money, and like I can do hard and difficult things, but I have like I didn't want to keep marketing myself to be like a full-time wedding photographer when I knew that my heart wasn't in it anymore.
That's probably
it was conflicting with what you wanted to do with the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It was somewhat of a scheduling thing, logistical thing. It was somewhat of like a client, I
just didn't care. I have a hard time being a part of things that I don't feel like some desire to change or shape or like help. And while the wedding industry, one could argue, has a lot of things that you could get that need help and growth and changing, because it's gotten a little bit out of control, and not just a little. It's very out of control. People spend lots of money that they don't have. They feel these like there's so many things that are, and not that that's the only way you have to get married, but it's changed a lot since I started 14 years ago. But I didn't feel a desire to try to like help any of those things, and like I wasn't. So once I kind of realized that, I wasn't super excited to like learn all sorts of new ways to take photos. Not that I didn't want to be a better photographer, but I wasn't like.
Wouldn't you say that a lot of that stuff was completely out of your control? Meaning, like, if the industry was moving that way, or people were making those decisions, like you can't stop them. That's what they wanted, or that's what was being driven by the industry you were in.
Yeah, but you can run your whole business from the perspective of like there's quite a few people who do it like it's like a marketing choice of saying that for those people who aren't looking for something traditional, who want someone who's going to be like, okay, if not everything is like, you could set a whole thing, you could then blog about it, you could speak about it, you could do lots of stuff. And
Okay.
I wasn't going to create my business platform around any of that. And I just had grown and changed a lot as a person. And I also, probably the simple, like one of the simplest reasons for wanting to do something else is I like a lot of things, and I was like, oh, I want to do something else. So
variety.
Yeah.
Even though that's like I could see all the downsides to that personality trait, it's probably one that a lot of people wish they had. Or I could just see how many people are miserable because they just spend their whole life doing something they feel no passion for. So even though you need money, obviously we all do.
Yeah.
But to have that sort of as your North Star is definitely probably a helpful quality to have just for quality of life. And it just pushes you to pursue things you are actually interested in versus the money's there.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that's an easy trap to fall into.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and you can make a lot of sacrifices that you don't quite realize until like a decade's gone by. I just know people who are like, well, I work in investment banking because I make it allows me to buy the plane that I want so I can go do these things. And then a decade later, I talk to the person, they're like, yeah, I'm thinking we're going to move to South Africa and I'm going to do like some seasonal flights and start this whole business because I realized I hate my job. So yeah, that's a real person.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's hard when you get to like a standard of living financially. It's really hard to go backwards.
Yeah. And like as we get older, you feel the practical realities around like we mentioned briefly, we're talking about healthcare and like the basic things you need for survival. And as you get older, healthcare becomes more important because you're gonna inevitably need to rely on those things. So if you don't have the resources, it becomes a much bigger deal than when you're like 25 and probably usually, if you're lucky, very healthy, and the only time is when you do dumb things that you could have maybe like that cause, like you break your arm because you got drunk and tried to dunk the ball.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Right.
Which is not something I've done because I'm really short and have no hops. Yeah.
So how much has your business transitioned? What's the scope of it now?
I would guess that I still photograph like quite a few families and I do like brand shoots. So I would say that probably like 60 or 70% of my business is now like this like marketing agency of basically one person that includes like design services but it's been like a big experiment too. Like I've tried so many different things to try to figure out what I am most drawn to and what scaling looks like. And also going back to what you said, like how do I build a business that gives me the financial freedom that I need, but also allows me to like live a healthier life. And so I'm still like in the midst of that.
Yeah, there's a line between like what you really want to do and what like gives you enough money to live.
Yeah.
Somewhere you got to meet somewhere in the middle of that.
It feels really weird to talk about yourself for so long when you're sitting with two other people and I want to be like, so Tim.
No, this is about you.
Well, what about Tim?
We can talk about Tim later.
I got here, man. That's not what I signed up for. I'm sitting over here.
Have you interviewed each other yet?
No, we haven't.
Oh.
It's not gonna happen.
It has to happen.
Yeah, it'll happen.
Your audience will want that.
Well, that's the thing. That's the loaded gun we're putting in the drawer for the audience. They know it's there, but they don't ever know when it's going to come out.
That's right.
How many tattoos have you gotten since you moved?
Oh, come on. No, don't even try.
No, I really do want to know.
Just one.
Just one?
Yeah.
That seems like, so most of them were from New York?
Yeah.
Or elsewhere?
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not talking about myself.
What can you talk about making the transition from one business to another and what that was like?
Very exhausting.
You're tired talking about it.
Yeah.
You don't have to if you don't want to. We can skip that topic or we can come back to it when you come on the show later.
I mean, it's probably a good topic. Anything you want to avoid is usually what you should talk about.
Okay. All right. Well, based on your facial expression, this was the worst question I've asked all the entire time.
Because it does make me tired to think about. I mean, even though things are like better. So I've been through the process of starting a business before, but I was 25 or 26. I didn't own a house. I didn't have a dog. I wasn't saving the max amount for retirement possible, and investing and all those things weren't things I was thinking about. So there's more pressure to succeed faster. And in some ways I'm more set up to succeed faster because I've already done this before. So it's easier to fail faster and learn from it and course correct and be like, oh, this is a parallel to how it took me a couple of years to realize the importance of charging appropriately for things. Much quicker lesson because I have had that other business decade of experience underneath. But I think it just goes back to a key difference would be I really knew I was I want to be a wedding photographer. That is a very specific, very definable.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of different ways to be a wedding photographer. You have to go to people's weddings and take photos. And while weddings may vary in there, you are literally following people around photographing things.
Yeah, it's very defined.
Yeah. And so now I've transitioned into something not as defined, and I've made it even less defined by being well, I do this and I do this and I'm going to try this. And so
gives you that variety.
Yeah, but the side effect of that is building systems and processes around is a lot more. And those things, a lot of these services don't fit as neatly into the box of here's the steps for I'm going to take photos of your wedding. I'm going to edit them and I'm going to deliver them to you. And
you're going to pay me.
Yeah. It's not, there's not of course people could be do you have this photo? Or people could be upset about something, but I worked with mostly I had really good relationships with people, and some of those people really trusted me, and so I wasn't having issues of can you re-edit this or can you Photoshop me or whatever. But now I work with something where I also need things from the clients to complete my work, and so that is a whole other added element of you want me to design your website and you said you're going to do your own copy. We have to actually provide me with that copy, so they have to write it. And as someone who also does things, I really relate. I have a lot of empathy for this, having people not finish those things, but that's very different. So I think that's been one of the bigger challenges. I went for something that was very easy to make formulaic to not. Had I tried to do this in my earlier 20s, it probably would have been, I wouldn't have been able to handle it, because even something formulaic, because of my like we talked about growing up, you kind of don't always know how much you can handle, and you're experimenting and figuring that out. I would have probably really gone really far beyond what was ever reasonable to accomplish. So yeah, that's probably why it's been hard.
Yeah.
And feeling the financial pressure I didn't always feel before. So not that I didn't need to make money, but I needed. Yeah.
You need a lot less money to get by.
Yeah, and I don't want to be sacrificed the present, where we can't do, you said, you get used to living a certain way, and it's travel is really important to me. If to not be able to travel is devastating. So it's okay, I've transitioned and I still want to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And buy coffee and not feel guilty.
Yeah, I think
even so much
even those go together, right? Because the travel recharges your batteries, so then you come back and work again, right? It's they're reciprocal in a sense.
That was good use of the big word.
I got that one right.
Are they reciprocal or they reciprocate?
You know what I meant, though.
Yeah, I did. I'm just giving you a hard time now because.
Yeah, they're reciprocating. Yeah.
I know I was saying when you're younger, you really push yourself to see how much you can do. Just I still do that today. I'm oh, well, why don't I just commit to overcommit, and then I'll learn a new way to figure this out.
Yeah.
Once in a while I do, but the other 5 times I'm why did I say yes to 5 things? I can't do this. Now I'm stressed out for.
Yeah.
Speaking of overcommitting, it's a really good thing that Kyle, who's always on time, was late and texted me because I literally really thought that I had nothing else to do for the rest of the day.
Okay.
Sent me a calendar invite. I have a really good memory for the most part, so like my calendar.
Hold on. You forgot about the podcast?
Yeah. I thought I know we moved it from Friday, but for some reason I thought it was next week.
I just can't believe that. Like, I mean, this is a big time podcast that you forgot about.
You'll know you've made it when people pay you $5,000 to be on your podcast, or 10, or going for 25 or 50, or 100,000.
Yeah, 100 grand if you want to talk to us. if you want to listen to me use words incorrectly.
Yeah. Yep. Then I checked my calendar, and sure enough, you were correct. I just don't tend to check my calendar on the weekend.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Why are you sorry?
Well, because I probably ruined your Sunday.
No, you didn't. It's fine. You made me run faster.
I'm glad I texted you when I did.
Yeah. Because I would have still been running with Stacy.
Yeah, because I might have, like, if I had texted you like 30 minutes before, like, hey, it would have been fine. You could have just canceled and redone it.
It would have been like.
Well, hopefully you didn't have any other plans.
No. We went and watched the Northern Lights.
We're going to have to edit this out.
Oh, this is all staying in.
My plans were like to take a nap because I stayed up past an appropriate bedtime to see the Northern Lights. It's weird, don't you guys think, to think about that in all sorts of places over the world, collectively people like had hours apart, similar experience the same phenomenon, because that doesn't happen very often. Like if you think about it, like Scotland, Ireland, Norway, Michigan, Vermont, like all, everyone's like, oh, then I saw the Northern Light. Like what other things? I mean, we experienced COVID, but it wasn't in the same thing where you're showing up at night. Like we don't have very many across countries all the time.
I never thought about it like that.
It's just, I thought it was interesting, like to see all these, like every picture on social media was like of the Northern, and like, and you're in Scotland, and
yeah, interesting.
And we didn't see them, but Cole sent us a picture that you guys of what you saw.
Yeah, it was cool. I've never seen them before up until a couple days ago, and they were awesome.
I remember when I was much younger, I was dating a girl and we're on the phone. We're like both outside looking at the moon. What the hell? We're just both outside looking at the moon. Like for whatever reason, that just reminded me about it, because you're in two totally different places, but you can like look up and see the same thing.
Yeah, that's
what kind of phone was it? Was it a cell phone or was it an actual like the house phone?
It might have been a house phone.
On the long cord.
Yeah.
Or I guess maybe it was a wireless one.
I think it was a wireless, but I think it was our house phone.
Yeah.
I sold enough wrapping paper in the school wrapping paper fundraiser that I got the shoe phone.
Oh, sick.
It was the worst phone ever. It was so uncomfortable to talk on and awkward, but I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
Good
thing. You guys ever get those clear ones?
Mm-mm.
It was like clear plastic ones. You can see all the electronics in them. Those are cool. We never had them either, but I thought they were cool.
You just made me think. I'm probably like talking to this girl and I'm wondering like which one of my siblings is on the other phone listening to me.
Yeah, that was the thing.
Did you just say, are you looking at the moon too?
Yeah.
Old were you?
I was a teenager.
This is very sweet too. You must have been really into her. Look at the moon together. I mean, it's really sweet.
It's bad that I remember it. It must have been an emotional moment in my life.
Yeah.
Kyle, did you do this?
No, but I mean, I remember talking on the phone with girls in high school or whatever.
Once, and this wasn't even that many years ago, someone who I liked who lived in a different state, he's like, let's put the same song on Spotify and press play at the same time so we can listen to it. And I thought that was like so romantic.
No way.
Yeah.
Did you sleep with him?
I can't say.
I thought you said someone who you would have liked to have lived in a different state.
No, they actually lived in a different state. That's why we're not dating now.
Yeah. You got engaged recently. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah, congratulations. Cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It's weird.
Why is it weird?
I think because I'm almost 40.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, your perspective. Like that used to seem so important. And not that I don't think long-term relationships and commitment is still very, very important to me. But like, I kind of like was like, oh, we may get married eventually. It doesn't really matter. Yeah.
I was thinking.
Yeah. Go ahead.
At some point in the beginning of this, you said your maybe it was your stepbrother or one of them had a kid so young or got married young. Didn't you say, was it your
it's my half brother.
It's funny how that's changed so much because like usually people would get married when they're 18, 19 and have kids, and now it's, I don't know what the average is now, but bet you it's a decade different.
I think it's like 30 now in the US.
That's the average age of people getting
or 29. Kids? No, kids is later, and like,
so married is 30.
Yeah, that's increased.
So everything's jumped back 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't imagine if I
maybe whatever.
If I got married when I was 22.
Like, oh my gosh.
Like I've said this a lot of times. I think I've said it on this podcast a lot of times. Like, you know how stupid I was when I was 22.
Well, that's an interesting.
I wanted to marry my college boyfriend. Thank God.
That's an interesting thing. It's kind of like I'm gonna do a callback for us from earlier what we were talking about. You know, you hold ideas for a long time in your life, right? And so, like, I don't know, I hold an idea of like, oh, I'm older now, getting married or whatever, right? For you, and so it's like, wow, that's you hold on to that old idea of like, oh, I should have been married 10 years ago, and so, but in reality, what you're saying is actually no, your alternative perspective is like, no, actually, we're evolving along with the world.
Yeah.
And if you were to get married at 22 now, you'd be an outlier. Based on what you said, if that's true.
Imagine who I would have married if I waited to have sex until I got married. I probably would have married someone just to have, like, I probably would have really liked
I think
them.
you're in a much better situation.
Yeah. But, like, that happens so often. Like, if you're so...
You're, like, to go back to the religion and everything, when you're young, you're just so impressionable. You're honestly so brainwashed in a lot of ways. Not that any of us aren't. But
you are.
It's just, like, you think that's what you're supposed to do, and that's what's modeled to you, then that's what you do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like a dichotomy because you are like brainwashed and impressionable, but also because of your youth, you see things that like we as adults miss that are so obvious and important and like so it's just funny. But then I think sometimes because you are impressionable and can do some really dumb things, like the ways in which you are actually sage and wise get so overlooked by adult and dismissed, which I think is kind of unfortunate.
So what are you thinking? Are you guys going to have a elaborate big wedding?
No.
Are you going to have a photographer?
Yeah.
I know, I'm just messing around.
I like photos. I still take them. I still like photos. I'm photographing 3 weddings this summer, which is like
Perfect. Cool.
And I want photos because I've always envisioned like more like just the main reason I want to have a wedding is just for the excuse of like spending more time with people that you know really well than you would otherwise. Like if you will use our friends Haley and Rick as an example, I've known Haley for 13 years. The most time I've ever spent with her is when I went to Mexico for her wedding, like consistently, like in a row, you know. And so like I like the idea of going somewhere or like spending more than like just a day. Like we're gonna have a dinner, and keeping it small so you can spend quality time. And people, because it's a wedding, are willing to like. We're also busy and it's very fair, but we can sometimes be like, oh, I can't go to the family reunion, or I can't go to the 40th wedding anniversary, or I can't make the graduation. But when it's a wedding, people are more like,
I do it.
Yeah, and so then you get to have this like time with people that is harder to have otherwise. And then the reason I mentioned this is because of photos. We all take lots of photos with our phones and everything, but because I love photos so much, it would be really nice to have like some non-phone photos of my friends and like my family, the people who I'm close that are like the.
You mean ones that get printed and put on the wall?
Yeah, that like capture the essence. I mean, there's like you can also print and put on the wall phone photos.
You could.
But they're not always like as candid. Like I don't know, they don't always capture like the essence or how you see the people that you love. Like because you're usually like a selfie or you're very camera aware. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
This also goes back to religion that we were talking about earlier. I'm just torn about weddings and marriage. So
I love it.
I always thought marriage was so stupid most of my life growing up. I was like, this is so dumb. This is such like you just spend a bunch of money and young people get married.
You mean weddings or marriage?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, weddings. Yeah, both. I'm like, yeah, not phrasing that properly, but yeah. And now, like, I just think, well, there is actually something to a wedding, though. And like, kind of like you were saying, all your friends and family are there. It's a like, you make a real thing of it, and you send out invitations, and you do stand up there in front of all your friends and family and everyone you care about and make this commitment. And I think there's actually something to that. Other than it just being very wishy-washy, like, yeah, we're together, it's whatever. Yeah. But the other part of me is like, it's so illogical and stupid. So,
no, it's fair. I mean, because I own a business and like Josh, the day after we got married, he's like, just so you know, if you just want to like have a commitment ceremony and not get legally married, that's fine. Like, so that, because in the state of Montana, like everything's 50-50 once you're married. And so he's like, if it would be easier, like, and I was like, this is so funny. If I was like 25 and I'd be like, what? We can't get married. You don't really want to marry me. And I'm like, oh, let's be real logical here. Like,
yeah.
It's just being practical.
Yeah. Like to me, it's not, I used to really like be more interested in the institution of marriage. And now I don't think that it's necessarily stupid, but I definitely think like my impression of it or like marriage isn't, a lot of people set out for it to be over your lifetime, but like we do all grow and change. And if relationships end, it's not like, I don't know, those when I was growing up, divorce was like, oh, you're a failure. It's like, oh no, this is probably just like very human.
Yeah.
It sounded like he died. Like he just fell over.
He smacked his head on the leg. He was asleep. I don't know what's going on down there. He was asleep. It looks like he's still asleep. Knocked himself out.
Yeah. It is a funny. But I do think like we don't have, especially because we are not, the United States has so many different religions and viewpoints, and we don't have a lot of like cultural traditions. And so sometimes, especially like as a white person of like mixed European descent, like we don't have a lot of like cultural things that were passed down like at all. So it's like weddings are one of the only times where you, and funerals, like you get people together. And I think too, because we're both 40, it's made like our parents so excited and happy. And so like it feels like having like a celebration is very meaningful to them. And that feels like a night, be like, well, you've done so much for us. Like you're so happy. We want to support that happiness. And even like with friends too, I was very surprised like how excited some people were. I was like, really? Or the people like, I can't wait to come to your wedding. And I was like, oh, we were thinking very small.
I wasn't even going to invite you.
Yeah. There's I forget his name. Doesn't matter his name, but there's a book called Die with Zero. Bill something or other. Good book. But he talks about like throwing I think it was a 60th birthday party or a 50th birthday party. And he goes into like this elaborate explanation to throwing the party, and he goes all out. And he's like, look, I've done really well for myself and I have X amount of money in the bank. And his whole book is like spending your money
before you die.
Spend your money before you die, but like
how to die with nothing?
In a very intentional way.
Is it how to die with nothing?
So he's like, die with zero money, die with zero regrets.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you should literally like optimize, like when you're 90, or 85 or 80, like you should be slowly incrementing, like losing money. Like as you get older, like you have less and less money and you're spending it on these experiences that you want. And so that you have literally maximized every dollar and you spend it on everything that you want to spend it on. And so one of the things he talks about, he's like, he paid all inclusive, like he paid everybody's way to get there and all their accommodations and everything that they were going to do for a group of, like a large group of people for like a week on an island.
Yeah.
And he spent a crazy amount of money, but he's like, I was with, all of my best friends from my entire life and my family for a week. And he goes, nobody realizes what that's like because nobody's ever done it before. So you've never had all those people. The only time you've ever had it is like all those people were at a wedding, right? Mm-hmm. But it was one day for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
And he goes, I got to wake up in the morning and I saw all my best friends like in the morning and we did something cool. And then I got to see my parents and then I got to see these other people and my business partners and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, I did that every day for a week. And he's like, it was totally worth it. So it's just an interesting idea of like, well, what would you spend your money on? Like if you had to design like the coolest thing to spend your money on, it would be probably something like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a wedding.
I would do something. Yeah, definitely. Like I've always be like, oh, we're all going to go on a week-long vacation together.
Well, he also talks about like the amount of like you're depositing a compounding, element into your like memory bank, right? A positive memory bank, because you're going to remember that for 20 more years. Yeah. And so every year you're like, remember that. And it's like a positive thing, which is, you think about like we're built on like all of our memories, right? It's like, it's such a cool idea.
He because I've been to so many different weddings, and I've traveled for quite a few weddings. So I've gotten to see like so much. And my favorite weddings have always been the ones where people are often all staying at the same location and most things are all there, so that you go down to the breakfast and you're suddenly talking to some people that because you're all at the same hotel at this country place, and then after the wedding is over, there's a hotel bar and everyone is there. Yep. And like you keep getting all of this additional time with people because you're all at the same place and it's not like disparate. And I mean, pretty much everyone I've ever photographed has always said like the one thing, even like when it's only like 40 people, is they never have enough time with people. Like they're like, I saw people so quickly, like it went so fast. And and
then the cool thing about weddings is like there's people that don't know each other at all that get to intermix, and then you get to see that happen, because you're like, oh shit, like that, I know this person from 10 years ago, I know this person from like 2 years ago. They've never met each other. They maybe never even heard about each other, but like you're the connection point.
And sometimes you're worried about some of those people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Like, hopefully no one brings up Trump or something.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But no. I mean, it is a really cool thing. So, because you're bringing together like people from different places. So. Yeah, we definitely also. I'm not feeling like Cole where I would need to talk for 5 hours.
Okay, no.
Not that I don't like. I love
How
Cole.
far are we in right now?
I don't know.
We're what is this? Yeah, we're 2:15 in.
That's a long time.
Yeah, we should wrap it up.
Not that I don't enjoy this, but talking a lot like hurts your jaw.
Yeah.
Oh wait, can I ask you one more question?
You can. I'm not saying I want to go. I just was saying.
How was the proposal? Was it an elaborate ordeal?
It wasn't elaborate, but it was an extreme surprise.
Let's hear about it. We got nothing but
time. We went to Norway in August, and it was the first time Josh had really been abroad. He'd been to Mexico. His dad is from Mexico, though, so like it wasn't quite I don't know. Well, it was foreign and not foreign in a way, because it was always with the guys of family and people who are fluent and really understand the culture well. So, and he, and we had a really great time, and he really, 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 really liked Norway, and we were like, we should go back and see what it's like in the winter. So we went back for in February for the winter, and we mostly were like remote working, and then skiing. And so we did like a ski tour one day, and it was really like the weather was perfect, which is not something you can necessarily count on in Arctic Norway. It's often like overcast and cloudy, but it was like sunny and you could see for miles. And I could see the place where I did an artist retreat in the summer from this ski, and like I had done a hike looking towards where we were skiing, and so it was like I was very like I had picked this out. I really wanted to do it, and already like while we were doing it, because I've learned to ski recently and never like I didn't even know that backcountry skiing was a thing when I was growing up. And so now to like backcountry ski, and I was like, this is so beautiful and amazing. I can't believe I'm here. Like, I'm the luckiest person ever. I was thinking like it was worth it to learn to ski just for today's experience. And I'm not joking. I literally was like, and I was like already feeling like I'm so grateful to all the people who helped me so that I could learn to ski, and like a mentor, you know.
Did you forget all the days that you were pissed off and tired? And
no, I'm a distance runner. That's just like part of the you forget. Of course you do. You run a marathon, you're like, that was awful, I'm never doing that again. And 20 minutes later you're like,
let's do it
what
again.
should I do next?
Yeah.
So we got to the top, and we were gonna have lunch, and there were a bunch of people actually, so we moved down to the shoulder because Josh and I both don't like people. I mean, not really, but kind of. And he's like, we'll eat our lunch here, and he's like, I'm gonna take a photo, and he sets up his bag to like take a photo of us, which I should have known right then. That is not, he's like never done that, to take a selfie, really. Well, maybe one other time. And then he's like, you can start eating. Then I come back, and his phone is, and I'm like, aren't you gonna set the timer, and like, don't you want to be in the photo? And then he's like, I'm taking a video. I'm like, you're taking a video of us eating lunch? And Josh will post like on his Strava like videos of his runs, and he'll like talk to me. So I was like, maybe he thinks this is cool to show people where we're eating lunch. And I was like, I was hungry. I was like, I just want to eat my food. And then suddenly he was proposing, and I was like, what the fuck?
You have a sandwich in your mouth.
Fortunately, I hadn't started eating it yet, but I was like very dumb. I don't think I'm a person who's super easy to surprise. I was very surprised. Not that I didn't like, we hadn't talked. It's not like it came out of nowhere where I was like, we need to have a sidebar. But like I knew we'd probably get married eventually, because Josh, it's not as important to Josh, but I was always like, I would like to like do some sort of commitment, like whether we officially get married or not. But yeah, I was we have a video of it, and I'm like barely saying anything, and I'm like, I kept asking if this was real, if the like ring was real. Like, yeah, and Josh was just funny. He's like, oh well, I mean, there's a refund policy, so if you
were in shock.
Yeah, I was in deep shock.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was very thoughtful, because it was very like nice. But Josh is a very private person, but he hadn't told anyone, but he did go talk to my parents, not like necessarily to get their permission, but I'm very close to my mom. And he didn't like, he kind of looked for rings, but he was like, I don't know what to get. None of this seems, he was very smart and probably realized that I'm kind of picky and probably wouldn't have liked anything. Let's just be real. Yeah. But I'm also a very sentimental person, and so he asked my parents if they had anything that he could use as a placeholder that had like family, that would have meaning to it. And that meant a lot to me, because I was like, oh, you really know me. Which I suppose is good if you're planning on like staying together.
Yeah.
Combining, like maybe getting a joint checking account or something. It's funny, like Josh today is like, yeah, your name is now on my all my retirement funds if I died goes to you. And I'm like, this is so weird.
You're my beneficiary. Yeah.
So
Shout out to Josh.
Yeah.
yeah,
Try to get Josh on the podcast.
he would be a good person to have.
Yeah, he would.
He wasn't boring as a kid. Not like me. He didn't follow as many rules.
Right. Hi, Bodie. All right, well, let's wrap this up.
All right.
Thanks, Tori.
Thanks, Tori.
This is great.
Quintessential. You're going to end on an engagement story.
Yeah,
That's it.
perfect. Yeah.
Cast.
Yeah.
She finally found the one, her soulmate.
That's it. This is the climax right here. It's all downhill. Thanks.